We have Diane Tuft, a New York-based mixed media artist whose focus has been on photography since 1998. Some of her work can be found permanently in the Whitney Museum of American Art and the International Center of Photography in New York City. Here's a sneak peek of our exhibition surrounding us that will be open on Tuesday at the BruceMuseum. Please welcome Diane Tuft.
Hi. Well, it's kind of hard to follow those two amazing scientists. I'm just an artist, but my background is with math and science. I graduated the University of Connecticut with a mathematics and science degree, and then I continued with my education at Pratt University and focused in art. So there's so much to talk about with my photographs. If you go around the room, they're about snow, light, wind. Antarctica is an amazing place, and I didn't really know how to start, so I thought I would start from the beginning of what I felt was important. So starting in 1998, I was very curious to see what would happen if I used film and tried to photograph something that I couldn't see with my own eyes. So it led me to photograph outside of our visible spectrum. So everything we see around us is our visible spectrum, but there are many other spectrums that come from the sun. There's the infrared spectrum and the ultraviolet spectrum. Bees, birds, fish, some amphibians and reptiles can see ultraviolet light. And snakes and beetles can detect ultraviolet radiation, but we can't. And what would it be like if I took a film that could record infrared light and take that photograph, not know what I'm going to get until I developed the film? I thought that was pretty cool. So that's what I did. So the infrared light spectrum actually captures, I used special Kodak high-speed infrared film, which unfortunately has expired and is no longer in existence. The last was made in 2009. And it records the reflection and absorption of long infrared light waves from the sun on the landscape. This effect causes the landscape that is warmer to appear white, and the darker parts are what are colder. And in some places, the warmer areas absorb the infrared light and actually glow. So this is one of my images. It's called Cosmic Surge, and it's just infrared light that is actually reflecting off of Lake Vanda, which is a lake in the middle of the dry valleys in Antarctica, and just the odd things that happen with light in terms of heat absorption, even though it's freezing cold and there's no, if you touch the ice it would be very cold, but the sun doesn't really know how cold it is, and it just touches things, and the difference in the temperature is recorded this way. And then the other one is, yeah, okay. So those were two infrared photographs. Now the shorter wavelengths of the ultraviolet spectrum appears as blues, purples, and greens. In order to capture these wavelengths, it's not so simple. I have to travel to places in the world that have an abundance of ultraviolet light. I noticed that bromines and sulfur in water seem to enhance these colors. Landscape that's closer to the sun and that has some reflectivity also seems to reflect ultraviolet light waves. And places in the world that have ozone depletion allow an abundance of ultraviolet light waves to reach the Earth. So ozone depletion mostly happens in the Arctic and Antarctica, which has led me to travel to the Arctic 5 times and to Antarctica in my last trip. Ozone depletion occurs in the stratosphere, which is the atmosphere above the troposphere. And the troposphere is the atmosphere that we live in. Ozone is an O3 molecule, and it protects us from the strong ultraviolet light waves that come from the sun. The ozone layer allows human beings to exist on Earth and protects us from too much ultraviolet light. When the sun hits the O3 molecule, it splits into an oxygen molecule and a free O radical, and then reconnects back to an O3 molecule. But if the O3 molecule does not reconnect, then ozone depletion occurs. And we know that there are many chemicals that prevent this from happening, and that's why we've been very concerned about our ozone layer. Ozone depletion can happen only when the stratosphere is very cold and another chemical comes into contact with the O2 and the O molecule to prevent it from reattaching to become ozone. And because the Arctic and Antarctica are closer to the sun and are very cold, they both have ozone depletion. An abundance of ultraviolet light waves are reflected in the landscape of the Arctic and Antarctica. The color photographs in this room illustrate how intense ultraviolet light waves are because they reflect the colors in the snow and ice of Antarctica. This photograph, Ultraviolet Reflections, is actually a photograph of pressure ridges on the sea ice in Antarctica. And I saw it as basically white. We would see it as white. It certainly doesn't look like this is real. But the sun hits these snow crystals that have been absorbed, that absorb the bromines of the sea ice and reflect the ultraviolet colors back to us. Each snow crystal acts as a prism. As an artist, I only observe and capture what I can see. All of my work has been through the exploration of a concept. What happens if? My last trip to Antarctica was made possible by receiving an artist and writers grant from the National Science Foundation to photograph the hidden light of Antarctica. I was able to travel around the Ross Dependency and photograph areas of Antarctica that very few have seen. Because I lived in the United States Research Center, McMurdo Station, for 6 weeks, I could speak to many of the scientists doing research in Antarctica and learn even more about this remote continent. I realized that Antarctica was a frozen continent where nothing ever melts, and it only snows 5 inches a year. Therefore, there are millions of years of atmosphere trapped in the ice and snow of this continent. And what I was really experiencing was the history of the Earth. Thank you.